is Sunday. This Sunday is August 31st, which is the annual International Overdose Awareness Day, which I like to commemorate and celebrate here on The Broken Brain for the fourth year running. I'll be doing a live stream for overdose awareness on International Overdose Awareness Day. So you can go to dwighthurst.com/live or live if you want to say it in a way that's, still works with the way it's spelled. dwighthurst.com/live will take you to a page that has the times that will be running for Sunday. It's broken into some different time zones. There will be links to go to the social media channels for The Broken Brain where this is going to be airing. If you would like to watch or listen, put it on while you're doing your dishes or driving your car, or cleaning out your fish tank, whatever it is. There will also be a big link there that says join. This is a live call-in type of feature, and you can join the program for anywhere from 5 seconds to 5 hours. If you can't do more than 5 hours, because we're not going to go longer than that. So click there to join as well if you would like to be part of it. If you have anything that is related to overdose awareness, if it's related to mental health, addiction, recovery, treatment, if it's related to engaging with your life, which is the major theme of this year, or just tangentially, or you want to hop on and just say hello out there and wish everybody luck and hope for the things that they are going through. No matter why, just, do that if you would like to. Love to have you. Once again, that's dwighthurst.com/live to participate and enjoy the live stream for overdose awareness.
The Broken Brain.
Recording in progress.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Broken Brain. It's me, your host, Dwight, here again to talk about psychology, culture, and all the things that we find laying around the intersection between those two things. And I love particularly when we find something very salient and important that really encompasses both, and we're going to be talking about that today. As you heard a little up top kind of thing, we are going to be talking about suicide trends, and things that influence that today. So please listen with that awareness of you decide where to play this and who to play it around, and your own, and all you listeners out there who know your own state of being and things as well of that. We'll talk pretty frankly about these things. I'm really grateful to be joined by author, teacher, moderator, speaker, Dr. Alessandra Seggi, who is the author of Youth and Suicide in American Cinema, Context, Causes, and Consequences, and who also teaches in the Department of Sociology and Criminology at Villanova University. And I'm sure when we get through it, we'll find out where to find some of the other wonderful things that you're doing. And so welcome, Dr. Seggi.
Thank you, Dwight. Thank you for having me.
One of the little bio that I got of you, I got to be honest, one of the things that was really exciting to me is that had a list of some of the appearances you've done or are doing, and you're going to be visiting my good friends over on the Reels of Justice podcast. They've all been, I've been on there, they've been on here, and they're also great supporters of my, I do a yearly event for opioid overdose awareness, and they've joined me on that, and just a great bunch of people. Anyway, I was excited to see you're going to be on there.
Absolutely. I actually already did my bit. I prosecuted Hot Tub Time Machine, but was found
ask what movie?
Not guilty, alas. And the episode is actually out.
Oh,
so
good.
yes.
Okay, so everybody should hop over to that in about 45 to 60 minutes. Don't hop over there before we're done, but listen to this first, obviously, as is always my policy with recommendations. But yeah, Reels of Justice. If nobody's listening to that, you can listen to that. If you're lucky, you'll hear either Dr. Seggi or myself on there as well. I have been there mostly as a defense because I'm a sucker for lousy movies, as well as I've only prosecuted good movies, so that made it hard to win, and defended lousy movies. But I think I've got a pretty good track record over there too. No spoilies for people as far as who wins, but anyway, so I'm really interested in this. I'm a big fan of movies, cinema, and I think that there are lots of topics, this being probably chief among them because suicide being so prevalent, that I think that responsible, and when I interview filmmakers, there's a lot of thought that goes into the ethics and or the morality of how this is showcased. And I think sometimes even with best intentions, people are kind of off on their own, charting their own course of what they think is the best, respectful, and safest way to present. And I think you have an old school mentality that's just, I'll do what I want. But I don't see that with newer filmmakers anyway. But anyway, just getting into this, what was it that attracted you to this this subject of the role of suicide in media?
Well, it's a subject, suicide and suicidality, that is somewhat foundational to the discipline of sociology that I was trained in. And so, to give a little bit of historical background in terms of the discipline, one of the founders of sociology at the turn of the last century, Emil Durkheim, really took it upon himself to use the complex reality of suicide, usually traditionally understood as something that has individual psychological components, to really challenge that single perspective and sort of broaden the scope of understanding. And so his challenge was, in order to legitimize the discipline of sociology in academia, and so say, hey, what we can learn about the causes, and again, in particular, but also the consequences, the context of suicide goes way beyond the psychology of individuals. And so in 1897, his seminal text, written originally in French, Le Suicide, really sort of spearheaded the understanding of suicidality beyond the psychological components. And so what is out there in society to trigger, which might trigger individuals to kill themselves, right? Sort of regardless or in addition to potentially psychological traits or psychological conditions that may also be contributing. So, right, it doesn't have to be either or. But again, at a historical period when psychology and philosophy were definitely the leading fields of study in general, and in particular in terms of this sort of act, right, anti-life in a way, right, the intent to kill oneself, that's how suicidality is sort of defined, right. Those were the disciplines that, again, delved into the ins and outs of suicide. And so, again, sociology was trying to broaden that scope and include, as Durkheim said, social facts. And so that's sort of my academic background and sort of the academic foundation of this interest. And then in a way, sadly, but also in a hopeful way, suicide has touched my life for a very long time. I have lost people to suicide and starting at a very young age. And so definitely, in addition to the pain and the confusion that are just two of the main sort of components of reacting to suicides, I also wanted to understand very much, again, what the so-called whys, right, of suicide, the reasons why people might do that, and then specifically then film and visual media, which are one of my lifelong sort of interests, then offered specifically to myself a safe ground to explore suicide, right, more comfortably, possibly, than zeroing in on the bereaved of the actual people that I knew that killed themselves. And that sort of safe ground, safe buffer that then films can offer me is definitely, and research shows that, a safe buffer for us as a community to discuss suicide, or at least to start this, right, much needed and long overdue conversations about suicide. Because one of the myths of suicide is that, right, if we talk about it, we may plant the seed for it in people's minds. And research is fairly unilateral. There is quite a bit of consensus, in saying that that is not the case, that actually discussing people's feelings and potential, tendencies towards suicide may actually help the individual. And so the stigma that though persists, right, around suicidality and the individuals that may survive a suicide, but also the people that are left behind, the so-called bereaved, is still sadly very prevalent. And in a way, it adds pain to pain. It adds suffering to suffering, to the extent that, again, who's left behind, or even the person that tried to kill themselves, don't have a chance to express all, right, again, the complexity that suicidality is. And I think a comment on the page of the novel that led to the Netflix series 13 Reasons Why, a comment from a young person said it best: suicide doesn't end the pain, it simply passes it on. And to the extent that then we don't discuss, though, that pain, not only do we pass it on, but we make it harder to deal with, right? And potentially, again, with fatal consequences. So I think there's a lot to sort of to think about here, to reflect on as a society, as a community, just in this very quote.
Yeah, I remember when that came out, 13 Reasons Why really sparked a lot of discussion about this because, of course, the plot, and if I remember, I didn't really watch it, but I remember that it was one of those everybody told me to watch, and I didn't quite make it. As counselors, we always get this. You should watch this. It's about this. So I missed out on it myself, but my understanding is it was about untangling reasons why someone in the beginning committed suicide, and then it kind of goes into reasons and things. And there was a lot of discussion at the time over whether or not this was being done responsibly, or, because one of the things, and I've had a couple of true crime podcasters who've come on that talk about this balance of trying to make it interesting at the same time trying to be ethical. and I think when people are doing particularly fiction, there is a drive, of course, because you want to get renewed, you want to get picked up, or your project, but what things do we use to be sort of exciting or titillating versus things that are needing to be treated very cautiously and respectfully? And there's a lot of hands that these things go through before they show up on the screen. So
yes,
some
absolutely.
Of them care more than others probably about that, I would assume.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's, go ahead.
Oh, no, please.
Oh, I just was going to say, I think one of the mistakes people make oftentimes is they treat these issues as simple when they're actually complex. And when we're doing social psychological research, we have to remember that there's no laboratory. You can do some experiments in it, but we can't, it's like, oh, do video games make us violent? And we argue whether it's yes or no. Does suicide depiction and we argue whether it's yes or no, instead of looking, and this is a strength in your work, I think, we're looking, there's a lot of real estate in between yes and no, right?
Absolutely. And on both sides, both in terms of media, always, but in this day and age more than ever before, right? A message, a media message is not just monolithic. They are very complex. And one of the reasons why and that complexity of the media, of the medium itself and the media message itself, because of its complexity, then teasing out, is it good or is it bad? Is it beneficial or is it going to be dangerous and hurt people? Is sort of an ill-posed question that it's too simplistic precisely in the way it does ask the question. And indeed, for instance, in the case of 13 Reasons Why, the idea that, yes, there is the piece, the series, but again, the series is not one thing, it's 13 episodes of 1 hour each. What is the impact of each episode? What is the impact of each of the peaks in each episode, say, narratively speaking? How does the series as a whole get, so to speak, digested? And if that wasn't complex enough, what's the afterlife? And that was a real thing for this specific Netflix series. What's the afterlife of the series itself on other social media where young people talk to each other about it and perhaps sort of work themselves up to a certain reading of it and a certain then related behavior based on that. And right, there's no strict connection or straight connection, to the original series, and yet there are sort of repercussions, ripple effects that live separate from that original, again, multifaceted and complex piece to begin with, that are not, right, not so much in the control of those people, which I'm not here to particularly defend, and in my book I'm fairly clear about that, but that, yeah, they live beyond, right? They assume a new life in the social media give and take back and forth of young people. And the trouble, quote unquote, with social media is that it's a very powerful tool in the hands, in the minds. And here I'm speaking to you, Dwight, right? A counselor, so that we know from a biochemistry point of view, right, are vulnerable to and have, and you probably can say this more eloquently than me, whose brains, right, are still developing and whose ability to control their emotions and their reactions, right, is still, that ability is still a little rough, is still in right, getting formed and, so to speak, perfected, honed. And so those then back and forths, right, have the potential to sort of to take the kids, so to speak, all over the place. And that's the media side of sort of the issue. The suicide side, as you said, right at the beginning, suicidality is an extremely complex reality. And part of that complexity is also straying away from trying to define the motives and the reasons, the so-called etiology of suicide, with one single reason. Hardly ever is there one single reason. And not only is suicide complex, human beings are complex in the best sense of the word, also not the bad sense of the word. So all of these facets, right, make for a very difficult, right, sort of conversation and relationship between then media and suicide and people. Yeah.
One of the points that you make that I think is fascinating, I had never thought of this before, is that although adolescents and youth and young adults who portray adolescents, they are very, very present in entertainment. And there's a lot of entertainment that focuses around that fascinating part of life, has been since going back to the 30s, I think is what you say in there. But
yes,
but the youth don't make, they're usually not involved in the writing, producing, shooting, that they don't have the power or input. And it occurred to me that this is also an industry in which it has historically been, a dangerous industry for grooming or, assault or financially economic abuse, either from parents or, so the industry is risky for young people, but they're also being put into scenarios in which they don't have power of how these stories are told.
Absolutely. And it's really a shame. It's an untapped opportunity to really hear what are you guys about, right? What are your struggles from your point of view, not from our point of view, almost paraphrasing the famous show Father Knows Best, right? The adults know best. And so, right, not that fast. I mean, certainly, right, there is maturity, there is wisdom to adulthood, but I think who knows what it means to be young is indeed the young people. And it's in terms of media and film in particular, it's really Tim Sherry, the youth film scholar par excellence, who actually endorsed my book, that argued first when he was still sort of finishing up graduate school, and was indeed embarking on the study of films for young people, that young people hardly ever indeed are, never mind the sort of the creators of these messages, but are not even asked.
Right.
And while historically, again, right, film traditionally has always had high barriers to entry because it was expensive. But even today, with the digital shift, where again, access to media and recording, right, and posting those recordings, right, is much easier still, right? Young people are sort of left out, not just of the conversation, definitely, but literally the production, the creation of these movies or media messages, as I sort of call them, as a whole.
Yeah, and oftentimes, especially I have a friend who works a lot in the film commentary and film critique industry, and I've seen him write this many times. That he said, it's great to have inclusion and diversity, and I believe that a lot. In casting, he said, however, let's go the next step. When you go to IMDb, click on the producers, on the writers, right? And directors, of course, too. And we're seeing that, we're seeing more diversity in that too. But if the writer's room is all middle-aged white guys and they're writing a story about marginalized youth and they're casting marginalized youth, and once again, I think hopefully we're improving, but historically, once again, there is a perspective that they just don't have. And it's
absolutely.
Yeah. So the other part too that I see is a lot of times I feel like the more common risk, more obviously more people go through periods of suicidal ideation. More people go through that than actually complete suicide. And I think sometimes we forget about it and we say, oh, it's a success if someone doesn't complete. But it can wreck quality of life and it, as well. And so I think we don't think about that sometimes, of how that can influence when people are stuck in that and we obsess on it and think about it a lot. We're probably not engaging with healthier behaviors at that time. Maybe even to the point where we shave our life expectancy shorter because of behaviors, which is not an active suicidality, but so that data sometimes is uncaptured, I think.
Yeah. And the idea that, again, going back to the beginning of talking then about what it means to be suicidal for a specific person, right, and what they go through, it can really, again, I definitely don't want to be a Pollyanna type of person here, but the idea of sharing as a form of dealing, of making sense of things, whether, again, they're positive or negative. And I actually came across an article in this respect from a couple of years ago. I believe it was in Wired magazine. The author was Ruscello, Ruscello, that talked about, again, at the community level, people that have experienced suicidality, how much they feel shut down, even by the sort of the tools that exist, like 988 and the like institutions, when it becomes known that they have suicidal tendencies. And so the reaction is to escalate the case, and so sort of turn it into an emergency, which doesn't help, again, the individuals. And here we need to be careful, right, how we say things, how we handle things, but it's a very delicate situation. But that the lack of a place to have a conversation about, for them, what it means is really still, alas, present, right, even in the main sort of line and tool that we have as a society, 988, to help people, right, live and move beyond the again, the sort of even suicidal impulse, right, or and so the idea that that sharing is still sort of shut down to some extent. That, again, doesn't have to be, again, either or, right? That if we escalate, we cannot listen, but it just seems to have happened that has been the case, at least for this, right, small community of people that had tried to kill themselves.
And it holds people back. I've heard from many, many people who say, well, if I tell someone I'm thinking about suicide, they react like I'm going to do it right now. And and sometimes there's a thought of just like, well, I'm in here, and I'm tapping my head for those who listen to the audio. I'm in here every day, and I deal with this all the time. And I wanted to let you in and be vulnerable, but now you want to drive me to the hospital today without any more information or discussion. And as you said, delicately here, and saying we don't. I definitely understand the, like, I'd rather, what do they say, the old expression, I'd rather be wrong than dead right, or something like that. Obviously you want to err, you want to be cautious, but at the same time, if someone is coming to you and talking about it and saying, I don't want to do it, I'm scared of these thoughts, or I'm worried about them, or maybe I'm worried because I'm not worried about them, having a discussion before we make decisions of what to do is very, and I've even heard this for people's experience with their therapists, where it's like, I'm afraid that if I even bring it up, they're going to make me go to the hospital, and I'm going to lose my job, and I'm going to, owe thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's going to make my life worse. And I always try to be very cautious in explaining to people what the rules of that are. And what people don't even realize, I'll just put this out there, most therapists we don't have some magic access to force someone to the hospital. Most therapists, of course, we can do a wellness check through the authorities. If someone is, I don't know, you get a message that says I'm going to do it, and it's like, please, the authority can go check, and then they have the power, and maybe a crisis mental health team, hopefully, in many counties in the U.S. But other than the mental health county authority, who does have some commitment, or medical doctors have some. Anyway, what I'm getting into is, it's like, you should talk about it and tell people exactly where you're at. And if you can't talk to your therapist about it, now you're trying to satisfy your therapist and deal with this on your own. And I think it's exactly what you said. We don't talk about the healthy aspects of how to talk about it. We talk about it as a crisis. We kind of say, but we don't train. We should kind of be having an ongoing dialogue with everybody who's not suicidal in order to generate that discussion.
Yeah. And also, if I may, having those conversations will definitely help inform better suicide prevention practices, right? Because we understand how, right, that reality sort of takes shape and shapes up for people, right? Of course, not everybody is the same, but right, how we cannot do solid, good suicide prevention if we don't know where the people are sort of coming from and how they are getting there, right? So, and again, I was going to say, as I said that, how they're getting there, then I thought of literally the physical places, right, that sometimes are sad, right, and tragic places where people decide to kill themselves, but preventing those places from being easily accessible, or the same thing, right, not having access to lethal weapons, etc., doesn't mean that that should be the end of suicide prevention, or
Right.
the only aspect of suicide prevention.
Yeah.
So let's do that, right? The famous barrier on the Golden Gate Bridge that finally did get installed, right? Doing that doesn't mean, again, we shouldn't listen, or it wouldn't be good for everybody if we listen to what people that struggle with suicidality have to say or want to share. Yeah.
Yeah, I interviewed someone who had actually, before that was set up, and he was one of the, I don't have it right in front of me, but he's one of the advocates who helped that to get passed.
Oh, yeah.
But he had actually jumped before that was there.
Kevin Hines.
Yes, it was Kevin
Possible.
Hines. Yes, I was
Yes.
part of an interview. I was producing a different podcast that he was on, and
Nice.
the
Yeah, he's
story, it's a great guy, and he miraculously
inspiring.
survived. But he said that on his way to do it, he was sitting on a bus crying, and he said, literally anyone talking to me would have probably kept me from doing it, but nobody talked to me because we don't know how to do it, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, I want to get some feedback from you, and this is one of my favorite sections in your book. When we talk about it from a standpoint of storytelling, what are some things that are good do's or don'ts that you've found through your research? Like, this makes it a, likely worse depiction, or when I say do's and don'ts, I mean what is likely to either be neutral or decrease suicidality in youth versus what is more likely to increase, just from what we know so far.
Yeah. Well, definitely there is a difference in terms of media between sort of fictional media and non-fictional media, as in, for instance, news report of actual suicides. But the sort of the good, so to speak, sensitive, well thought out practices are somewhat shared for both categories of media. The ones that have been developed both in the U.S., abroad, through WHO, in combination with a variety of organizations, most of which are supernatural or supranational. I wish they were supernatural organizations, because maybe they could help us more, right? That would clinch it for us all. But supranational organizations, and so those guidelines have been compiled for news media to rein in and minimize the so-called Werther effect, the sort of and or imitation effect of potential, news stories about suicide.
Yeah, that was fascinating. The non-fictional reports if I understood correctly,
yes,
can have more power to increase suicidal ideation, even more than fiction.
In some ways, and again, here, right, we have to take that statement or sort of that conclusion with a grain of salt, because like we said before, at any rate, media messages are complex and multifaceted themselves. But yes, and in a way, it's because sometimes fictional media allows people to relate to the characters in a very sort of compelling way. Definitely, having said all this, staying away from sort of detailed descriptions of the methods that not only are really of bad taste, but they really don't add anything to the story, and may indeed trigger literally copies, right? Imitation of those specific methods when we talk about specific details in terms of the tools, proper or improper used, or amounts, specific substances, and things like that. Also, it's important to offer context for the suicide and suicidal act or suicidality, suicide ideation, whatever the specific manifestations are, which is, again, right, a difficult thing to do, not necessarily impossible, but indeed, because of the complexity of human beings and the suicidality itself, right, it can be hard to show that complexity, especially, right, with all the other constraints of a media message, right, of a certain format, of a certain duration, and things like that. However, it's important to at least to strive towards that, and to be sure that, again, media content creators are aware of these things, and then also offering information and literally sort of direct details about where people can turn to in case they are in a crisis, and or themselves or people they know may be struggling with suicidality. The other side, so to speak, of the coin, although the coin has, as far as I'm concerned, again, many sides, but at least one of the other sides of the issue of this reality is the idea that we can also offer, while portraying and representing the struggle or struggles that come with suicide, the suicidality itself, we can also offer, at some level, to some extent, some reasons, and more specifically, tools that would allow us to overcome the sort of the crisis and the intent to kill oneself. And those depictions and the potential for positive, as in non-suicidal behavior as a result, those depictions are depictions that fall under the sort of the category of the Papageno effect depictions. In other words, portrayals of suicide that allow people to move beyond the crisis and find a way to cope. And I'm going to say two more things related here. One, the opportunity and the tools, so to speak, or invitations to cope, are important in the sense that one way in which scientists have conceptualized the idea of suicide and the reality of suicide is that it exists as a sharp imbalance between people's difficulties and their coping skills. And so, right, the difficulties outweigh, alas, that person's ability, or perceived ability, by the way, of addressing those issues. And so when depictions of suicide offer ways to reach out, whatever the specifics, and sort of tool up with, indeed, initiatives, ideas on how to cope, and so indeed increase their coping skills, their struggles, right? That is really, really important. And then in terms of the Papageno effect itself, so these depictions of suicidality in all its hopefully complexity, that though offer a way, right, and tools out of that crisis. Take the name, the Papageno effect, from the Mozart, the Magic Flute opera, and the idea of this character that was indeed, because of a classic trope of unreciprocated love. They wanted to kill themselves, but then they think of a positive, oh no, but I can rely on X. And so they move away, they sort of resolve that crisis. And this research and understanding of how we can still tell stories that possibly again grab the audience from a business point of view in terms of media, and yet that are less likely to sway individuals to copy that destructive behavior. That research and that positive aspect, again, the Papageno effect, is fairly recent. We're speaking about the last 2 decades. And it is indeed a researcher at the University of Vienna in Austria that is almost unilaterally responsible for this development. His name is Thomas Niederkrotenthaler, that looking at the reality of suicide in Austria and Vienna in particular, said, well, what can we do? What could be done, right, that can again help people while still representing the struggles that may go on around suicide. And one of the aspects, not so much about film, but still very much media, and still media that attracts young people, is his study of a beautiful, heart-rendering song by a rapper, Logic. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It has the old 800 number for that has now become 988, right? The suicide hotline, suicide prevention hotline, and basically the song is the song of a young man struggling and saying that he's lost his hope for living. In the specifics, we understand from the video that it's a young gay individual that is being rejected for his sexuality, basically, or feels ostracized, and so says, I don't want to live anymore. But in the short, if you want, span of that song, although again the pain and the sort of desperation, right, that's it, I can't keep going, in the span of that, in the scheme of things, short song, there is enough positivity and enough sharing. Literally, one of the lyrics is who can relate, and that's it. So it's not the individual anymore, and this young kid that is struggling to be recognized for who he is, struggling, or better, that has a hard time, or better, even better, that other people are giving him a hard time, right, being recognized for who he is. He's who he is, right? I want to say, but other people are sort of pushing back. Yeah, right. You're not quite okay, and so, but then, like I said, literally, I don't want to live anymore. But then, who can relate? And so that young kid and his pain is not alone anymore. Because and the sharing, like literally, I'm going all the way back to ancient Greek and the meaning of tragedies, the chorus in tragedies, right? The idea that it's the community, it's the people as a whole that join in the pain. And if there is any meaning to pain, that meaning is in the sharing. Right. It would be better to avoid it if we're doomed and condemned to feeling it, then let's share it. And that's as good as it, so to speak, can get. So that song that, again, 1-800 by the rapper Logic, not only was it, had a million, definitely, I don't remember the specific numbers, but definitely had a lot of hits. But not only that, that's a third of the good story. The best part of the story is that the indeed suicide prevention number had a spike in calls. So indeed, let's show the struggle, let's voice the struggle, but also here's a hand take it, hold it. We can, right? It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be pretty necessarily, but we can do it.
Wow. Well, it's a very important as well as a fascinating subject, and one of the greatest things about this is it does normalize the ways to have these conversations, and I think that's
Yes.
one of the greatest services that you're doing through promoting this, as well as the great content and this is also a very heavily research based book that talks about studies and things, so that we can. As you put it before, not necessarily, studies don't always give us a complete declarative, 100%, obviously. And I talk a lot about that on here as people try to use them that way. However, what is observable is useful, especially with something such a amount of importance. I want to give everybody the information of where they can follow you and the best place to get the book. Before that, of course, I always like to ask everybody about if they have a way of giving back to the community that's important to them. Could be a charity or a nonprofit or a good community habit. What would you like to share with people?
Well, definitely. I've been involved with the American Foundations for Suicide Prevention for many years. That foundation is the most important foundation that raises funds for research in suicide prevention. And one of the many initiatives that they have had for decades at this point is what they call the Out of Darkness Walk. That happens at different times of the year, or better, throughout the year in an inordinate number of cities and towns in the country. And so I've joined that walk, and the spirit, the reason for that walk is ultimately to raise awareness about suicide and suicide prevention, and to raise funds for the research on the former. And so I join every year the suicide prevention walk, or the Out of Darkness walk, that in Philadelphia happens the first Sunday of October. And if people are interested, if you look on their website, they have sort of the calendar of all the walks throughout the year. And those are, again, community walks in different cities. They also run and organize, and one can spearhead walks on campuses across America, because alas, we know that suicide rates for young people are unfortunately high. And for the same reason, raising awareness in a setting for a population that is particularly vulnerable.
Absolutely. And that's great, because I always love when charities have a way to get involved that isn't just in one area, that helps people to find ways to do that. So the AFSP, that's great. Great insight. Well, is there a best place or a better place to find the book? And also, where do people find you? Do you have a website or a social media that's like a good place to follow your work?
Yes, I have a website with my first name and last name, alessandraseggi.com. And I'm happy to report that it's out of date, the website, because I'm getting too busy to update it. So I think it's
always
a good,
actually a good sign. I found a lot of guests.
right?
The guests I have that are doing the best work are like, oh yeah, I got to update that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm too busy doing things and podcasts and speaking to journalists to update the website. But yes, that's where I concentrated the book itself and related research to it. And the book can be bought as a hard copy, hardcover, softcover, and ebook, even at the level of chapters, with definitely decreasing price in that order. So from the hardcover to ebook, from high to low price, and then chapter by chapter, and even more economical price.
Accessibility is one of my,
Yes.
near and dear to me, and so I always admire that. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, a quick reminder to listeners, as you know, the Broken Brain picks one local charity every month to highlight. And this month we are highlighted Improving Lives, which is a charity, a nonprofit in Nottinghamshire, England. That's in the UK, for those of you who don't know what England is. And you can go to improvinglives.uk.org in order to learn more about this wonderful organization. We've had guests from there on in the past as well. What they do is they provide community services for mental health, especially for those that are either waiting or have not yet qualified for treatment or are otherwise in between places where they can get treatment or needs like that. They do an excellent job supporting the community there in Nottingham. So go to there to support them. And as always, if you join the Patreon for the Broken Brain, then half of your donation for the whole duration, your donation for the duration, will get halved and sent to the charity that was the charity of highlight in the month in which you joined. So go to improvinglivesnots.uk.org or go to patreon.com/brokenbrain and become a member today. Get the bonus material and also help out the charity. You can go to both, by the way. Share, donate, get involved. It is that way every month that you join the charity of highlight. 50% of your donation will go to that forever, which is how long you'll be supporting the program, I assume. Dr. Seggi, thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to share it with us.
Thank you, Dwight.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.